Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shimmering heat of the ancient Persian plateau. A place where summer doesn't politely knock, it body slams the door open at sunrise. Imagine walking under a cloudless sky so bright, it turns sand into mirrors and bricks into stovetops. You can almost hear your sandals sizzle, and yet somehow people didn't just survive here. They built empires through garden parties and even wore layers. Yes, layers. Robes, turbans, sashes, the whole breezy ensemble. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in the heart of Achaemenid Persia, maybe around 500 BCE. It's mid-afternoon, which is unfortunate timing because the sun is currently doing its best impression of divine punishment. Dust clings to your skin. Air feels like soup. But then, like stepping into a dream, you cross the threshold into a nobleman's home and everything changes. Cool, dry, quiet. It doesn't make sense at first. No magic runes, no cold drinks, no wizard standing in the corner with a frozen staff, just mud brick walls and stone floors. But as your eyes adjust to the dim interior, you notice the architecture working like a whisper. Thick adobe walls are doing most of the heavy lifting, holding out heat like a jealous lover. Small windows are placed with mathematical precision, inviting light without roasting the room. And high ceilings let the hot air rise far, far above your head, like a grumpy roommate who needs space. In one corner, a servant pours water from a clay pitcher into a basin. Even the sound is soothing. The water glugs slowly. You notice a little breeze moving across the floor, cool and deliberate, like it's been assigned a job. This is no accident. What you're feeling isn't just a lucky gust of wind, it's the beginning of Persian air conditioning. You flop down onto a cushioned platform, still marveling at the temperature difference. The floor beneath you is stone, polished smooth by centuries of bare feet. It holds the morning chill like a secret. If this place were in modern hands, you'd expect to see a tangle of fans and extension cords, but there's nothing. No buzzing, no humming, just calm, calculated design. Historians agree that ancient Persia's climate demanded serious innovation. But how did they go from "it's too hot" to "let's redesign our entire civilization"? It likely began with architecture that embraced nature instead of fighting it. The basic principle was simple: protect from heat, channel coolness. But of course, nothing is ever quite that simple when humans get involved. Especially not Persians. These folks were overachievers with a flair for elegance. And so houses weren't just rectangles with roofs. They became machines for thermal comfort. The outer walls were made of mud brick, thick, dense, and sun-baked to perfection. These acted like thermal batteries, soaking up the heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night. In some homes, walls could be nearly a meter thick. Yes, a whole meter. That's more wall than ego at a royal banquet. Now here's the fringe detail most people miss. Some homes used a mix of straw and camel dung in their wall plaster, which actually improved insulation and durability. Not exactly HGTV material, but remarkably effective. And don't worry, it didn't smell. Not after curing. Probably, we hope. Inside, the air was deliberately slowed. Corridors weren't straight and wide. They curved, narrowed, and opened unpredictably, guiding breezes along specific paths. It's like the house itself was breathing, one slow exhale at a time. Of course, not everyone had access to such elaborate cooling. The nobility? Sure. Wealthy merchants? Definitely. But your average goat herder? Less likely. Still, even the simplest homes followed the same principles: shade, insulation, and stone or clay flooring that stayed mercifully cool underfoot. And then, just when you're starting to think the ancients were all about function over flair, you spot the art. Frescoes line the walls, geometric patterns and floral designs that catch the eye without disturbing the calm. A miniature garden in a ceramic pot rests by a doorway. The sound of a nearby fountain trickles gently, barely audible, but oddly hypnotic. Persian homes weren't just cool, they were beautifully cool. And here's the cheeky twist. For all their elegance, none of this would have worked without the original MVP, gravity. That's right, every breeze you feel, every chill that lifts the sweat from your neck, is powered not by motors or fans, but by the gentle difference in air pressure, temperature, and the tireless pull of the earth itself. Historians still argue whether these architectural features evolved together as a unified system, or if they were happy accidents, refined through trial and error over centuries. Some say it started with mountain dwellers adapting cave-like dwellings. Others argue for Mesopotamian influence drifting in with merchants and scholars. But wherever the inspiration came from, Persia took it further, made it elegant, made it soothing, made it last. Because here you are, thousands of years later, leaning back on a silk pillow, listening to wind slip through a hallway that's barely changed since the time of Cyrus the Great. The air is soft, the walls are wise, and outside the sun still blazes, but it's not your problem anymore. You haven't moved in what feels like an hour, lulled by the cool hush of your surroundings. But eventually curiosity nudges you back to your feet. You rise, slowly, as if you might offend the stillness, and walk deeper into the house. That same whispering breeze brushes your face again, like it's following you. And then you see it. Towering above the flat roofline is something that looks almost like a watchtower, but without any guards, bells, or dramatic declarations. It's elegant, rectangular, and capped with slits or vents facing the wind. This is the Badgia, the wind catcher, and it's about to become your favorite ancient invention. You step outside for a better look. The structure rises like a quiet sentinel over the city. From afar, it could be mistaken for a minaret or chimney, but unlike chimneys, it doesn't send anything out. It draws air in. Here's the basic idea. A badgia captures wind from above, channels it downward through a vertical shaft, and releases it into the rooms below. The height of the tower allows it to intercept even the faintest breezes that might not reach street level. And down in the shaded chambers, the air arrives cooler, more compressed, and blissfully refreshing. Now, if there's no breeze at all, that's fine too. The badgia can be flipped into passive mode. Hot air inside the house, being lighter, rises naturally and escapes through the tower, creating a gentle vacuum that pulls cooler air in from below. It's the architectural equivalent of sipping lemonade while doing absolutely nothing. Some towers were unidirectional, only catching wind from a single direction. Others were fancy multitaskers, built with 4 or even 8 vents to catch breezes from every compass point. Because, ancient Persian engineers weren't about to lose a gust. You wander up to the base of the tower and peer inside. It's hollow, like a stone throat. The temperature drops instantly, like walking into a whisper. You can even hear the wind murmuring as it tumbles downward, an ambient, hollow whoosh that almost sounds like it's humming you to sleep. Badgias weren't just slapped onto roofs like afterthoughts. They were designed carefully, tailored to local wind patterns, building orientation, and even social norms. Taller towers caught faster-moving air, but in dense neighborhoods, shorter ones were preferred to maintain privacy between households. Can't have your neighbor peeking down your windshaft after all. That's just bad etiquette. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the more extravagant badgias had internal wooden vanes or ceramic fins to help channel airflow more precisely. In one surviving structure in Yazd, these internal channels make a kind of wind labyrinth, like a flute designed for the house instead of your lips. Historians still argue whether the concept of wind catchers originated in Persia proper, or if it evolved simultaneously in other arid regions like Egypt. There's evidence of similar structures in the ancient city of Babylon, and even hints of basic prototypes farther east in the Indus Valley. But Persia, especially during the Achaemenid and later Sasanian periods, refined the idea until it became an art form. And yes, let's appreciate that name for a second. Wind catcher. Not wind pusher, not wind blower. It catches wind, like a net catching butterflies. There's something poetic about that, isn't there? This civilization didn't try to overpower nature. It coaxed it, trapped it gently, used it kindly. As you meander through the streets, you notice these towers rising everywhere. Some square, some octagonal, some covered in intricate tile work. They blend into the skyline like organ pipes, humming softly in the sun. At one point, you pass a merchant wiping sweat from his brow. His shop is small, but even here, a miniature badger rises from the flat roof above him, catching just enough air to keep the interior livable. His secret? A strategically placed curtain that directs the breeze across a basin of water before it hits his face. Instant refreshment. It's the ancient version of a swamp cooler, minus the electricity, the noise, or the warranty problems. By the time you return to the nobleman's home, the afternoon heat has climbed even higher. But inside, you'd never know. The badger breathes calmly above you, its open mouth tilted just so. There's no sudden blast, no icy shock, just a slow, cool exhale that keeps you floating in the perfect bubble of not hot. You lie down again, this time under the shaft itself, and let your mind wander. You imagine engineers of the past standing barefoot on rooftops arguing over airflow angles and vent width. You picture workers layering bricks with practiced hands, knowing each one was part of something much larger than a wall. A cooling symphony. One theory suggests that some of the grandest towers were tuned to make sounds like an Aeolian harp, when the wind hit them just right. Whether that's true or just romantic speculation, it's a lovely thought. Air not just moving, but singing. And for a culture that prized poetry, harmony, and elegant simplicity, it fits. Even now, in modern Iran, many homes in desert cities still feature wind catchers. Some restored, some still functioning. Some converted into decorative flourishes. But the principle remains untouched. Because when something works this well, you don't reinvent it. You just lie beneath it and breathe a little slower. You close your eyes. The breeze is steady. The tower, ancient and wise, sighs above you. And for a moment, you think maybe, just maybe, you could survive here after all. You wake to the quiet realization that you've somehow fallen asleep under a centuries-old ventilation system. Not bad for ancient tech. But the story of Persian cooling goes deeper than towers and breezes, literally. Back on your feet, you venture further into the home. The air thickens slightly, not with heat, but with a cool dampness. You descend a flight of stone steps, your sandals echoing faintly. At the bottom, you step into a dim chamber that feels 20 degrees cooler than the world above. No windows, no magic, just clay, shadow, and silence. You've entered what's basically a giant human-sized thermos. This is the Sardab, an underground room designed to store cool air and shield inhabitants from the brutality of Persian summers. Sardabs were often paired with badgirs, allowing descending air to spiral downward into what was essentially the house's nervous system. Here, thick earth packed around the room keeps heat out while preserving the nighttime coolness. It's not cold exactly, but after a walk through a 110-degree bazaar, it might as well be the North Pole. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat. The air smells faintly of clay, dried herbs, and perhaps a hint of old apricots. No furniture, just practical alcoves, small water vessels, and the suggestion that this room was built for stillness and silence. It's the sort of place where even your thoughts whisper. Some Sardabs had multiple purposes: storage for perishable foods, a quiet space for afternoon rest, or in wealthier homes, even makeshift reception areas for special guests when the upper levels were simply too oppressive. But no matter the function, the result was the same: relief. A clever little trick often used in these rooms: hanging wet cloths near air shafts. As air passed over the moisture, it cooled slightly further through evaporation. One breeze, two benefits. All this without a single moving part. If you listen closely, you can hear the air shuffle along the walls almost like it's tiptoeing. Now here's a fringe detail that makes you blink twice. Some of the walls were embedded with coarse river pebbles or broken ceramics to absorb and retain chill overnight. They might look decorative, but they serve the same thermal function as those blue ice packs you chuck in your modern cooler, only these don't require a freezer. Historians still debate the origin of the sardab itself. Was it a purely Persian innovation, or did it evolve from older Mesopotamian cooling rooms used for storing grain and wine? Others point to similar ideas in Egyptian tomb design where internal chambers were kept cool not for the living, but for the embalmed. But here in Persia it was definitely for people who liked their figs chilled and their midnaps uninterrupted. Above you, the badgir is still doing its job. Cooler air is drawn down and pools in the sardab like invisible mist. If you sit long enough, you'll begin to notice how the room encourages stillness. It doesn't want you bustling, it wants you mellow, thoughtful, horizontal, ideally. You imagine a nobleman retreating here during the peak of the afternoon. He reclines on a thick cushion, eyes closed, sipping from a clay cup filled with something minty and tart. Around him, faint sounds from the street drift down, donkey carts creaking, distant chatter, the occasional shout of a seller. But here, in this clay-wrapped cocoon, all of it is softened. Some sardabs were so effective they were used for sleeping through entire summers. And here's where it gets even cozier. You might have also found a family's treasured rug stash down here. Priceless hand-woven carpet stored safely in the coolest, driest place in the house, rolled up like scrolls of warmth waiting for winter. There's an odd, almost tender connection between temperature and memory. Sitting in this room, you don't just feel cool, you feel cared for. As if the building itself is wrapping its arms around you and saying, "Don't worry, I've got this." You run your fingers along the walls. The clay is smooth, faintly powdery. You think of all the hands that pressed and packed this earth into shape centuries ago. The builders weren't just thinking about architecture. They were thinking about comfort, about how people live, about how to coax happiness out of heat. There's a water jug in the corner, resting in a shallow ceramic bowl. You lift it. It's not icy, but it's cooler than you'd expect, thanks to the insulating properties of clay and shade. You take a sip, clean, refreshing, and laced with the quiet joy of simple technology. That's one thing Persian architecture understood deeply: don't overcomplicate. The materials were humble: mud, straw, lime, stone. But the thinking was anything but. Every element had purpose. Every curve and corner was placed to serve heat and humans alike. And this didn't just happen in homes. Entire caravansaries, those road hotels for traveling merchants, used the same tricks: thick walls, central courtyards, underground storage. A traveler might ride in from the desert half-baked by the sun, but by sunset, he'd be sipping warm goat's milk and lounging in a cooled clay cell. You shift again on the mat, reclining now, eyes half closed. The temperature here hasn't changed in hours. It holds steady, like a promise. Above you, the world bakes. Below, in the belly of this clay and stone refuge, you stretch out and feel the centuries press gently around you, not heavy, not suffocating, just present, just there. You've spent the day walking with ancient Persians through their air-conditioned homes, but the deeper truth is simpler than any tower or tunnel. They learned to respect the heat, not conquer it, not ignore it, but live with it, coolly, calmly, and always with style. You emerge slowly from the sardab, blinking as the golden light of early evening softens the edges of the world. The heat is still there, simmering gently in the bricks and dust, but it no longer feels hostile. It's as if the land itself has exhaled a little. And now you're ready to follow the coolness to its true source, the underground rivers of Persia. They don't flow in the open like the Nile or the Euphrates. They don't roar with drama or sparkle under the sun. No, these are the qanats, subterranean aqueducts that hum beneath the earth like veins of water and wisdom. A local guide, his robe light and loose like a sail, leads you out to the edge of the city. There, scattered across the desert plain, are what look like a series of sinkholes or shallow wells lined up in a perfect curve toward the mountains. Each one is a vertical shaft dug by hand and spaced just far enough to give laborers access to the tunnel beneath. This is how a Qanat breathes, quietly, efficiently, with the patience of a civilization that understood the long game. You crouch beside one of the openings and feel a gust of cool air rise toward your face. It smells like stone and mineral and time. Below your feet, water moves, not fast, not loud, just steady. It has traveled for miles, drawn from mountain snowmelt, carried downward through a gentle slope beneath the earth, protected from evaporation, safe from the greedy sun. This system is older than most cities you've ever heard of. Some historians trace the earliest Qanats to around 1000 BCE, though others argue for an even earlier origin, possibly as far back as the second millennium. What they agree on is that Persia perfected them, turning arid wastelands into green, livable landscapes. An ancient Persian engineer might not have owned a watch, but he could calculate slope gradients with astonishing accuracy, less than 1 degree of tilt over miles of terrain. Inside the tunnels, workers would sometimes lie flat, chiseling stone with crude tools, scraping away inch by inch. It was dangerous work, hot, dark, and potentially deadly if the tunnel collapsed. But the result? A silent, invisible water highway. And the best part? No pumps required. Gravity, once again, is doing all the heavy lifting. You descend into a Qanat access point. It's cool here, noticeably cooler than the surface. Your footsteps echo against moist stone. The passage is narrow, but the air is surprisingly fresh, thanks to that steady draft. You could almost nap here if you weren't slightly concerned about scorpions, or bats, or that one tiny rock above you that suddenly looks less stable than you'd like. Even so, the comfort is undeniable. Homes, farms, and entire cities were built around Qanats. The water wasn't just for drinking, it fed gardens, powered mills, and cooled homes when paired with badgirs and sardabs. In some houses, channels were carved into the floors so water from the Qanat could flow directly through the living space, chilling the stone tiles and delighting barefoot children. Here's your quirky tidbit. In more upscale homes, people would float scented petals or citrus peels in the water channels, creating aromatic, cooling flows. Imagine sipping pomegranate juice while cold water drifts by, carrying the faint scent of orange blossoms. Peak Persian. Above ground, you notice how entire neighborhoods follow the Qanat lines. Trees grow in rows where water runs closest to the surface. Markets are clustered near access points. Even the placement of mosques, schools, and bathhouses reflects an intimate awareness of the underground network. Historians still argue whether the concept of Qanat spread from Persia to the rest of the ancient world, or if similar systems arose independently. The Romans had their aqueducts, impressive, elevated, and very Roman, but they relied on costly construction and visible flair. Persia, by contrast, took the humble route, subtle, hidden, self-sustaining. As you walk along the surface again, the sun now low on the horizon, you realize how much of this landscape is shaped not by the wind or stars, but by water you never see. The Qanat isn't just a utility, it's a philosophy, a reminder that the best solutions are often the quietest. In Yazd, a city still known for its network of functioning Qanats, people gather around ancient access points like they're meeting by the village well. Water engineers, called muqannis, are respected tradesmen, trained from a young age to read soil, listen for echoes, and maintain channels that are often hundreds of years old. You sip from a small clay cup offered by a shopkeeper. Water drawn directly from a nearby Qanat. It's cold despite the hour. Not refrigerator cold, but natural, cave-dwelling cold. And as it passes your lips, you feel more connected to the earth than you have in ages. You glance back at the desert stretching away toward the mountains, knowing that somewhere beneath it all, the Qanats are still flowing. Patient, purposeful. invisible threads stitching civilization to survival. And you can't help but admire a culture that saw a mountain, not as an obstacle, but as a starting point for something beautiful, sustainable, and ever so soothing. You've followed the breeze from the sky and traced the water under your feet. But now it's time to explore the middle ground, the space where architecture, air, and human intention all meet. You step into the heart of a traditional Persian house, the courtyard. At first glance, it looks like a quiet garden, but don't be fooled. This isn't just a pretty place for sipping tea and feeding birds. It's a climate-regulating powerhouse, a thermal trap turned thermal haven. The walls close behind you, and the temperature drops by several degrees. It's not magic, it's math. Persian homes were designed with inward-facing courtyards to shield against the desert's scorching embrace. No outer-facing windows, no flat walls for the sun to bully. Just a protected square of serenity, cooled by water, shaded by trees and tuned, yes, tuned, to catch breezes. You walk slowly, your footsteps muffled by smooth stone paths. In the center, a rectangular pool gleams softly in the evening light. It's called a house, and it's not just decorative. The water evaporates in the dry air, gently lowering the surrounding temperature. Sometimes, a series of small fountains keep the surface in motion, further boosting the cooling effect and adding a constant lulling sound, like someone humming a lullaby just out of reach. You dip your fingers into the water, it's refreshingly cool. Around the edges, mint and basil grow in carefully maintained planters. Not only does this make for flavorful tea, it also fills the air with a gentle herbal scent that masks the dust and heat beyond the walls. And the trees? You've got shade-giving sycamores and pomegranates, oranges if the owners were ambitious, and date palms if they were patient. These trees weren't just planted for fruit, they created microclimates within the courtyard, layered canopies that filtered sunlight in such a way that you could find the perfect amount of dappled shade, no matter the hour. Here's your quirky detail. Persian garden designers would often align courtyards so the shadows of specific trees would fall on particular sitting areas at specific times of day. That's not just landscaping, that's sun choreography. You settle onto a carved stone bench placed precisely where the afternoon breeze intersects with the longest strip of shade. Of course it is. Everything here is calculated for comfort. And if it's not calculated, it's been observed and adjusted over generations. One of the servants walks past, carrying a tray of clay cups filled with a chilled, yogurt-based drink called dew. It's tangy, salty, and laced with dried mint, a surprisingly effective coolant. He nods politely and continues on. You take a cup for yourself. The cool clay against your palm is instantly soothing. Historians still argue whether the Persian courtyard was first and foremost a cooling innovation or a spiritual one. After all, the enclosed square resembles a kind of earthly paradise, an oasis, a miniature universe complete with water, life, shade, shelter, and symmetry, order. Zoroastrian principles emphasized balance and harmony, and this space reflects those ideals down to the last leaf. But the climate benefits unmistakable. You glance up and notice the walls are painted in light, sandy tones, not just for aesthetics. Light colors reflect sunlight, reducing heat absorption. Some homes even embedded fragments of glazed tile into the walls to catch the light and bounce it playfully around the space. As dusk begins to fall, the air grows noticeably cooler. This isn't a coincidence, it's a cycle. The stone, water, and shaded air have been working together all day to trap just enough chill for the evening. And the courtyard doesn't hold the heat the way open streets do. It releases it gently, like the earth letting go of a long breath. You stretch out along a cushioned divan under an archway. Above, the open sky is framed perfectly, blue melting into lavender. And with no street-level noise or distraction, you feel like you're in your own personal universe. A quiet world, cooled by design, where even your thoughts seem to move a little slower. Some Persian homes had multiple courtyards, one for men, one for women, one purely for guests. Each one followed the same principles, but with slight variations based on use and status. And in wealthier homes, these courtyards connected to those sardabs you remember from earlier, creating a seamless circuit of coolness from sky to earth to soul. You trace your fingers along the low marble table beside you. It's streaked with age and smoothed by centuries of teacups and gossip. You imagine a family sitting here 300 years ago, listening to stories, watching the stars appear one by one, never once needing a ceiling fan or AC unit. It's humbling and a little inspiring. You begin to understand that ancient Persian cooling wasn't just about escaping the heat, it was about shaping the day, the hour, the very mood of life. You rose early, napped when the sun was highest, spoke softly in shaded corners. Let the wind and water do the talking, let time slow down. That mindset, cool, quiet, unhurried, is stitched into every wall, tile and plant in the courtyard. And the result? A space not just for living, but for being, fully, calmly, almost invisibly. Outside these walls, the city pulses with life. But in here, it's just you, a faint breeze, and the soft gurgle of water carrying stories centuries deep. Evening settles in like a silk curtain, and the courtyard slips from golden glow into tranquil shadow. The fountain still whispers in its steady rhythm, but now it seems slower, like it's winding down for sleep. You linger a little longer, stretching, yawning, and resisting the inevitable end to this ancient tour of coolness. But we can't leave without one final chapter, a slow goodbye, a lingering breath through the ruins of what once was. You rise from the bench, pass through the archway, and step outside into the quiet night air. The city is hushed, stars bloom above you in a sky so wide you feel like a pebble beneath an ocean. But your feet follow a path, dusty and worn, toward a forgotten structure just beyond the edge of town. There, half swallowed by earth and silence, sits what remains of a small estate, a ruin, its walls bowed with age, its tiles chipped by time. Once, this place was a home. Perhaps noble, perhaps modest. No one knows anymore. But as you step inside, a soft breeze greets you, gliding through a cracked window frame and up along a broken shaft. Even now, the bones of the building still know what to do. You wander through its ghostly outline. No roof, no furniture, just pieces. But the design is unmistakable. There's the courtyard, sunken, now choked with weeds. The outline of a fountain basin, the shade of a tree stump that once reached skyward. You trace your hand along a wall that would have held coolness like a secret. Even with the stars overhead, the clay feels colder than the night. And there, on the far side of the ruin, stands a fragment of a wind catcher. Only 2 walls remain, but the opening still faces north, still tilted to where the winds used to come. You climb the rubble cautiously, perch at its base and look up. The shaft is filled with shadows and spider webs. But if you close your eyes and tilt your head just right, you can almost hear the breath of the past moving through it. A sigh from a time when breeze was survival and silence was comfort. You sit there for a while just listening. There's a deep peace in knowing that people once lived here not just to survive, but to thrive, to rest, to laugh, to drink tea and tell stories and raise children who understood how to stay cool without flipping a switch or paying a bill. They built their world with stone, water, and patience. Historians still argue whether structures like these should be called passive cooling systems or simply brilliant design. Some claim modern engineers still can't replicate the efficiency of Badgers and Qanats without relying on computers. Others believe it's all just clever use of obvious principles. But when you're sitting here, surrounded by centuries of still air and fading stone, the labels don't matter. You feel it. You understand. These were not gadgets, they were gestures. Architecture not as dominance over nature, but as partnership with it. You glance once more at the cracked basin of the courtyard, the echoing shaft of the tower, the empty corridor where Sardab air once chilled sleeping bodies. Then, slowly, you rise. The path back is lit only by starlight and memory. You walk slowly, as if your feet don't want to leave, as if the earth beneath you still hums with the knowledge of clay and cool water. As you return to your lodging, a modern place with artificial air and LED lights, it feels strangely loud, not in sound but in spirit. The hum of electronics, the faint buzz of a refrigerator. The coolness is there, yes, but it's sterile, forced. It doesn't greet you, it just is. You sit by your window, crack it open and close your eyes, and that's when the wind finds you again. A soft, lazy gust drifts in from the darkness, brushing your cheek like an old friend who doesn't say much but always shows up when needed. It smells faintly of dust and old herbs. You can almost imagine the scent of a courtyard fig tree, of clay jars sweating gently in a sardab, of the cool stones that once lined a house. The story is over, but the feeling lingers, and maybe that's the best part. Because now, every time you hear a breeze, or sip a cool drink on a hot day, or walk into a quiet room that's just a few degrees cooler than it should be, you'll remember. You'll think of the Persians who caught the wind and shared it with the world, who taught heat how to be humble, who carved stillness from the sky, the earth, and the space between. And as your breathing slows and your eyelids grow heavier and your thoughts begin to wander, you realize you've learned something valuable, not just about architecture or climate or ancient civilizations, but about how to live a little more gently and a little more slowly and a little more coolly. And with that final sigh of wind outside your window, you fall asleep.